In the dead of night, when the moon is high and ill winds blow, and the banshees cry and the moonlight casts an unearthly glow, arise, my love, with tales of woe.
Good evening. It is 12 midnight, the paranormal hour. Welcome to Ghost to Ghost. I'm your host, Chief Lawson. Ghost to Ghost is a podcast to discuss all paranormal and parapsychology subjects. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats, so tell your friends, tell your family. Come listen to Ghost to Ghost. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is that hour. Welcome to Ghost to Ghost. Tonight, our topic is Belle Gunness, the Black Widow of LaPorte, Indiana. And tonight, my co-hosts are Jennifer Verne, research manager and podcast producer.
Good evening.
And Heather Lawson, case manager and podcast director.
Hello.
We're going to start this out because a lot of people don't know who Belle Gunness is. And this is an interesting story. It's a great read.
Yep.
So I'm going to let Jennifer start out with her expertise of the history of Belle Gunness.
In the early hours of Tuesday, April 28, 1908, a farmhouse north of LaPorte, Indiana, burned to the ground. Farmhand Joseph Maxwell managed to make it out of the fire alive and ran to get help. Help was too late. In the burned-out basement of the home were the bodies of 3 children and a headless woman. The farm belonged to Belle Gunness and her 3 children. On Thursday, April 30th, Ray Lamphere was arrested for arson and murder. Officials didn't have to look too hard for a suspect, and Belle had repeatedly, over the last year or more, been complaining to all the town that Ray had been harassing her and making threats. She had even tried to have him found insane in court by a jury, but they found him sane and he was let go. On April 27th, just over 12 hours before the fire was discovered, Miss Gunness had executed her will at the LaPorte Circuit Court. When attorney M.E. Lightler asked her what caused her to want to make out her will, she said that Ray had threatened to burn her house and kill her, and she wanted everything in order in case that happened. She left everything to her 3 children, but in case something happened to her children, she wanted the money to go to the Norwegian orphans' home. Ray Lamphere denied the claims, but there are claims that he made 2 confessions as well.
That's interesting.
That's something I had never heard before. And I
never heard the part about the Norwegian.
The Norwegian,
yeah,
that's important.
Specific.
That's important. Remember that.
Yeah,
Keep that in the back of your minds. Yeah. So I was reading newspaper articles, which there are a gazillion of them in the Chicago paper after the fire happened. I mean,
yes.
When something like this happened in that day and age, people made it an outing. I mean, this crime scene, which we'll discuss here in a second, became a public circus, a public carnival. People came. They were selling lemonade stands. They were selling popcorn.
Yeah.
People were coming to visit the site. There were postcards that were being sold of one of the victims. It was a photograph of his dead body.
It's not
made
funny,
into
but I can
postcards.
see this, yeah.
Oh, man. They showed it in the book that one of the books I used for research. But, I mean, there were tons and tons of articles. And in one of the articles, it says that Ray had made 2 confessions, and one was kept under lock and key in a safe and then given to a publisher, and that confession was published.
Wow.
Right, Heather?
That's weird.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? Now, what that instantly made me think was that it's a story that was made up.
Yeah.
Well, backstory, yeah.
By the reporter.
By the publisher.
And we've talked about this before.
Hey,
how many times...
dirty laundry sells.
Well, how many times in the Jack the Ripper case were false letters and stories written in the paper just to sell papers?
So many.
Right? So, I don't know. Because Ray Lamphere denied killing Miss Gunness.
Well, let's be honest. This. I mean, like the song says, dirty laundry, it sells.
Right? Yeah.
People want to hear that. They're more fascinating. The British have an equity to love murder mysteries. If you look at BBC, 70% of what's on there is some sort of, it's either
It's a
Catholic
cop
priest solving
show?
mysteries, or it's either a cop show or it's a
Some
murder
kind of
mystery.
Yeah.
We watched a series for a while. It was Murder in Paradise. It was a little island. They killed more people on the island. I think they bombed in Hiroshima. My God, there was always killings, and I've been through those islands. I remember asking a guy
There
in
aren't
St.
that
Lucia.
many people there.
No, I said, "What was the last murder?" I was about 68.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but
that many people don't get killed.
no, exactly.
No.
But okay. Speaking of Midsummer Murders, How to Survive in a Quaint English Village is a book that's out.
Yeah. Oh, no kidding.
No, it's a book that's out. How to Survive being murdered in a quaint English village.
My God,
Oh
I'd
my
almost
gosh.
buy that just to have it.
It's making the rounds on Facebook on the Midsummer Murders
Well,
God.
like page.
Midsummer Murders is like one of the longest running.
It is
Oh,
one of the
God,
longest
yeah.
running. At like 1996, 98 was the first
Yeah.
episode. Badgers Run. So that, yeah.
One of the longest running murder mystery shows.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
You have
Okay.
to laugh because I got recently, we were at the Rabbi Burns supper, which we do every year. And I talked to a brother who was from Edinburgh. And, it's just funny. I asked him, I said, why in the world do all the Brits and everybody in the UK love murder mysteries? He says, because our bloody lives are boring.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. I guess.
I'll take it.
He says, we dream this shit up at the pub.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah. All right.
They got notebooks too.
Yeah. All right.
If
We
you don't
digress.
know,
That's
Jennifer
that's
got a
an
new
inside
notebook.
joke. Yeah.
Brilliant ideas while I was doing
Yeah.
something. I will just keep that. So, Ray Lamphere, we know he was her farmhand.
Yeah.
And in a newspaper article on April 30th of 1908, he admits to passing the burning house as it was on fire that night.
Oh, really?
And when he was asked why didn't you do anything?
I've not heard this account.
Yeah. So during the inquest, Lamphere changed his story, saying that he went by the house, but by another road across another field, and he saw the Gunness house and noticed the roof was afire. When asked why he didn't notify the inmates or call the neighbors, he answered, "I was afraid I might be suspected of having set it afire."
Oh, God.
Okay, so keep that in mind too.
Sets a pace for the kind of the atmosphere of the village,
Tone.
doesn't it?
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is not a true crime podcast, but this is a true crime podcast right
See
now.
something, say something. No,
Okay.
anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so given the fact that Miss Gunness's life and suspicions of those in the community in LaPorte and Chicago, which we're going to get into,
Yes.
'cause Bill had lived there before, and the fact that the woman's body was headless, some believe that there was some shady business going afoot.
Well, yeah, because most
Okay.
fires you don't have decapitation as part of the.
Right. So
Damage to the
did
body.
Ray Lamphere hate Belle so much that he decapitated her, threw her and her kids into the basement, set everything ablaze, but left Joseph Maxwell alone in his bed?
Yeah.
Okay, don't forget, Joseph Maxwell was the
Staying
farmhand
there, yeah.
because Ray Lamphere had been fired. He
Okay.
was the farmhand before Maxwell. Okay.
Okay.
So it's fishy, but let's backtrack. We got to find out who Belle Gunness is. Okay. She has a very long and convoluted tale, and we're, like I said, we're not a true crime podcast, so we don't have time to get lost in it. But if
Yes.
you're intrigued by what we talk about today, there are numerous sources to go to for a more in-depth telling. Just search Belle Gunness, and you're going to get an eyeful. I've been reading and listening to stories for her for over a month, and I still have questions. I flip-flop back and forth about what I think might have happened. So she was born 1959. No. 1859 in Norway. She was named Brunhild Paulsdatter Storseth.
Wow.
She was one of 8 children, and in her early days in Norway are a little sketchy. So her path to America seems to have been with an older sister and her husband who had immigrated and were living in Chicago. There is one story I heard, but I can't confirm, and at the age of 18, that she may have been pregnant out of wedlock. Had an argument with the baby's father, A fight occurred. She was hit or struck, resulting in a miscarriage. The father was said to have been a wealthy citizen in her community, whereas Belle, of course, was not. He was never charged, and she left for America.
So she already has a history.
Who knows? That's possible, maybe not.
Proven or not, she has a history.
If it did happen, that could prove her hatred for men and or children.
Yes.
And there's questions we're going to talk about later about whether she was even able to have children. If she wasn't, and all of these kids were adopted, maybe she did have a massive enough injury causing a miscarriage, causing infertility later. We don't know, but it's a possibility, so I put it in. When she was in Chicago, she was living with her sister's family. She was working as a domestic servant and then as a butcher's assistant in a butcher shop. So she was actually shopping.
Makes an interesting ad too, yeah.
Yes, it does. She was a tall woman, robust. She was about 5'7", 5'8", and heavy set around 250 or so. Very strong and very sturdy. And in those days, that was kind of an important...
Solid lady.
Yeah, very solid. It was very important.
Like a roller derby, I'm just saying. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Think about your roller derby statues. That kind of figure, that curvy, heavy, attractive woman.
Yeah.
So she was quite a catch, and you'll see why she's even more of a catch later.
Okay.
So during this time in 1884, she meets a man named Mad Sorensen. Mm-hmm. He's also an immigrant, and they get married. They then decide to open a candy store because they'd rather be their own bosses than work for somebody.
And a candy store at that.
Yes, at a candy store, a confection store. Mm-hmm. So this store doesn't do very well, and financially they're taking a loss. During this time, their home burns down in a fire.
Okay.
The insurance pays out, and they're able to help the couple start over.
The fire chief of me says there's a pattern to this arson thing. But anyway, go ahead.
Just wait,
yeah. Go ahead.
Shortly thereafter, the candy store is lost in a fire. And the insurance pays out and covers the claims on that candy store.
Yeah.
So the financial loss is no more a financial loss. It's now become a financial gain.
Yeah.
2 fires, 2 payouts, and Belle has been able to restart over each time, right?
Yes.
Okay. Mads and Belle have 2 children. They more likely have 4. And we don't know if they're, like I said, we don't know if they're foster children or legitimate children.
Yeah.
So 2 of the children, Caroline and Axel, these are most likely foster. However, Myrtle and Lucy are thought to be the couple's natural offsprings. However, both of these foster children, Myrtle and Lucy, their birth certificates are kind of funky. And we're going to get to that in a second.
Okay, yeah.
But Carolyn and Axel...
Like their death is, too.
Well, they're... Yeah. Myrtle and Lucy survive the longest, but they do end up dying. They're the 2 that... along with the third one, they're 2 that are in the basement in LaPorte, Myrtle and Lucy. Carolyn and Axel die in Chicago in 1896 for Carolyn and 1898 for Axel. They die of colitis. Now, life insurance claims are held on these guys, so those are paid out as well. Remember, child mortality rates were very high in these days.
They were.
And acute colitis is a thing.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be something necessarily looked at.
No, because poisoning was a thing too, and acute colitis and poisoning are extremely similar.
Yes.
You really could not determine
at the time, you don't have email, you don't have electronic systems, so, one insurance company may not share, and it doesn't say, but I bet you a dime these are different insurance companies.
And there's no real
What do you
way
think?
to
I mean,
test for...
makes sense.
Well, it could be, but there's no way to test. And strychnine or arsenic poisoning in small doses could ruin the stomach lining, the intestinal lining. It could present as colitis.
I want to point out, we're not making any suggestions, but if you're looking for a channel on poisonings, just to know a little bit... No, never mind. Go ahead.
There are many more podcasts on that.
Yes, I bet.
So, we can't make assumptions. However, it doesn't look promising based on what happens later on. Hindsight being 20/20, right?
Always.
Okay, so 1900 comes a new century and maybe a new life for Belle.
Okay.
July 30th, 1900, Mads Sorensen dies. His death certificate lists cerebral hemorrhage.
Basically stroke.
So I was reading again another newspaper article that he came home with a headache. So she gave him
Drain cleaner? No, I'm sorry.
No,
Anyway, sorry, I couldn't resist.
Probably some aspirin.
some
Yeah.
headache powder.
Yeah, which was
Okay.
that basically, Is it
Right?
Now, let me ask one question. Going back. Now, the candy store was in LaPorte then?
No. This is all in Chicago.
Okay, so we're still in Chicago.
Yep, we're still
go
in
ahead.
Chicago.
Go ahead.
And we'll see why she ends up in LaPorte here.
Yeah.
So, of note, I looked at the 1900 census,
Mm-hmm.
and Mads and Belle do appear with Myrtle, who's 3,
Yes.
Lucy, who is 1, and an adopted daughter, Jenny, who's 10.
Okay.
Okay. So, Jenny was the daughter of a friend of Mads Sorensen's.
Mm-hmm.
His wife had died, leaving him with multiple children, and Belle asked to take Jenny and raise her for them.
Okay.
So the father agreed, however, he never let her adopt her. Okay. But
Okay.
Belle claimed her as an adopted daughter and changed her name.
Ah,
Okay.
which they could do at the time, not legally, but they could do it.
Right. Correct.
Yeah.
Which Belle probably did quite a bit of this.
Does seem like there's a pattern.
In coming the Norwegian orphan home.
Okay.
I'm wondering if that wasn't what we would consider today a shell company for Belle.
Well, it could
Okay.
be.
So
Yeah.
just keep that in your
I
mind.
never thought about that, but that it makes
Right?
sense.
So we know that Jenny was adopted in quotes. Okay. Belle and Myrtle and Lucy, we don't know. Belle
Okay.
referred to them as her own, but the birth certificates, which I had a hard time finding, which now that I'm invested in this, I'm going to look further.
Okay.
Stories say that the mother's name is not listed. Only father's names are listed. Fathers.
Okay.
But it should be Mad's name that's listed
Yeah.
if they're Mad's and Belle's.
Okay.
Okay, but so I'm thinking
And the
the
twist
foster
in
too.
the plot. Yeah.
Right?
Well,
Okay, so let's think about on Jenny for later. And I know Myrtle and Lucy were also killed, but Jenny was living with Belle at the time in LaPorte.
mhm.
Okay, but she's not the third victim in the cellar.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mad's symptoms could have been indicative of strychnine poisoning, and for his brother, the real clincher that something was up was July 30th was the same day that a new insurance policy took effect, and the old one was set to lapse the following day. So this was the one day where Mad's
Two
two
insurance policies covering at the
policies
same
are
time.
overlapping.
Yeah.
Belle was paid out by both claims to the approximate amount of $8,000.
Man, back then that was big money.
Well, in today's, that would be $250,000, $250,000.
Oh yeah.
He demanded an autopsy to be done, which was, but they didn't autopsy the stomach.
Or its contents. Yeah.
I don't know
Which
why.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I guess.
Well, I
because-
don't know if the autopsy, if forensic medicine was that far along.
I
Were
don't
they?
know.
I don't-
It
I
should
don't
have
know.
been.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
it
makes
should have
sense.
been.
If you could test for poisonings in the blood, you should have been
Yeah.
able to analyze stomach contents.
Right, exactly. Well, and they did, because later on when they tested the stomachs of the victims in the LaPorte fire, they found strychnine.
Ah.
Okay. So at this point, the Norwegian community is looking at Belle. She's had multiple fires, multiple insurance claims, multiple deaths of her family members, and now Mad's dead.
Yeah.
And so they began to talk, and not in a good way. And Belle always seems to come out financially on top.
Mm-hmm.
So in November 1901, with insurance money in hand, Belle takes the 3 girls and they move. She buys a pig farm in LaPorte, Indiana. Remember
Okay.
pigs.
Pigs, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I see where this
And
is going.
she settles down.
Silence the lambs all over again. Anyway,
Well,
yeah.
pigs will eat just
And
about
about
anything.
anything. Yeah.
Yes.
But
So
the bacon's
for
really
teeth.
good. Yeah.
well, their teeth come into play too here.
Yeah.
Okay. So she meets Peter Gunness in LaPorte, and in April of 1902, they are married quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But in December of that year, late one night, Peter goes to get his shoes from behind the stove in the kitchen where they were drying out and warming up. He bends
Okay.
down to pick them up, knocks his head on a pot of scalding water from the stove, and it falls onto his face and his hands, burning him. He abruptly stands up, which causes him to hit the top of the stove, dislodging a sausage grinder from the top of the shelf, and it falls and crushes his head.
This seems almost like a
And he dies.
Oh, what?
He dies.
He dies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, that makes sense. I tell you what, I was trying to think of it as a Rube Goldberg. I mean, it always sounds
That's
kind of
exactly right.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but yeah.
So, insurance paid out $3,000 because her explanation of the events matched the wounds.
I'm glad someone's getting this
Right?
money I keep paying the insurance companies, never get a damn thing out of it.
However, due to some unease in the community, they did hold an inquest, but there's not enough evidence, and so the verdict was open. They couldn't confirm nor deny anything.
The pigs weren't saying anything.
She got it, right? Well, the pigs didn't have to say anything on Peter because he was intact.
Ooh.
Yeah. So Peter's dead. During Peter and Belle's marriage, Belle gets pregnant.
Really?
Yeah.
We were thinking all along she was unable to do so.
Right? So is Mad infertile? Or
Were they not?
was
trying?
Belle ever really not pregnant? Because people in the community really never saw Belle pregnant. But maybe not.
Well,
Maybe her orphanage got her another baby and she said that she was pregnant.
well, that's common back then. They wouldn't,
No, they wouldn't. I mean,
No.
it wasn't,
That would be kept very quiet.
it would, and all of a sudden you show up with an infant.
Yeah, because you were thought of poorly as you were unable to bear children. So that makes sense.
But in my opinion,
Yeah.
I think that because all of these foster children that she would offer to raise for a fee,
Well, yeah.
For a fee.
And that's what they do nowadays, let's face it.
right? So I think
Yeah.
maybe this Norwegian orphanage was a scam on her part to get children so that she could get money as a foster,
A baby mill.
right? Something. Yeah.
Mhm. Sure sounds like it.
So
Yeah.
Belle's a very rich woman, right? She's got a lot of money. She's got a pig farm. She's very well off, okay?
Yeah.
And now Peter has died, leaving her all of his money. At this point, Belle starts placing ads in newspapers for suitors. She places these mostly in Norwegian publications. Farm hands come and go, as do suitors. They come, meet Belle, help her out by giving her funds, like she needs them.
Yeah.
And then they decide the situation isn't for him, and they depart. Or so Belle says.
No, they don't.
Right? Only one man that we know of actually left unharmed, and his name was George
Survived.
Alexander.
Yeah, survived.
Survived. Well, the story says that while he was staying with her in the guest room, one night he awoke to find her standing over his bed with a very
And that's creepy. Did she have a
Evil.
weapon in her hand? Yeah.
not that is mentioned, and who knows, right? Because she was more of a poisoner,
Yeah.
and then she dismembered after death.
Maybe
She
she
was
was
just checking to
calculating
find- yeah.
his
Right.
weight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Going, why the hell isn't this working?
So he didn't like that. He felt uneasy. He didn't like that. So he packed up and left that night. And that's how he survived.
Probably the smartest lad of the bunch.
Yeah, yeah.
Didn't stay for breakfast.
No. Okay,
No.
so remember Jenny? When she was 16, she had a suitor. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. Now,
Okay.
whether Belle didn't want the suitor hanging around, whether Belle was
It depends
jealous
on who thought it was
of-
meant.
I mean,
not meant to be. Yeah.
right. Jenny was getting older, maybe becoming prettier, taking
Yeah.
attention away from Belle. Belle was sent off to school to a Lutheran college in
Oh.
either Minnesota or Los Angeles, California.
How old was she then?
16.
16. Okay.
Okay. So let's go back, or let's go forward, back to 1908.
Okay.
Okay, in January 1908, Andrew Helligan, a farmer from Aberdeen, South Dakota, and a Norwegian, comes to court Belle. He was only supposed to make a quick trip, but he never came home, and his brother went looking for him.
Okay.
Assel Helligan had written a letter to Belle asking about Andrew, and he got a letter back saying that Andrew had left and gone to Chicago and had been thinking about going back to Norway. Assel didn't believe this, not for one word.
Yeah.
So he goes
Who was
to
the letter he
LaPorte
got back from?
from Belle.
Belle.
Yeah, that figures. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Andrew was here, absolutely, but it didn't work out. He went to
back to
Chicago.
Norway eventually.
He was
yeah.
thinking maybe going back to Norway,
There's a place called Valhalla over there. I think.
Right. Well, yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
So he arrives back in LaPorte on May 1st, 2 days after the fire.
Sure.
Just as the bodies are being, taken care of
Yeah.
from the rubble. They'd been trying to sift through the ashes to find the head
Yeah.
from the headless woman to, put Belle back together.
Sure.
Right. And so he arrives to this whole scene on the Gunness farm, right?
Okay.
Now, he's like, where's my brother? There's no way. He's got to be here somewhere. So he's asking around to the most recent farmhand, Mr. Joseph Maxwell, right? About his brother. Did you see him? What's going on? He wasn't discovered in the basement. And he asks, had any holes been dug recently on the property? Because this guy's pretty
there you
smart.
go. Yeah,
he's thinking,
not.
He's thinking Belle's done something with my brother.
Yeah,
because
Sherlock Holmes here, yeah.
Of course, the course of events is the man comes, Belle and the man take the man's savings and they put it in Belle's account because they're going to start a new life together, right?
Yeah.
And
Joint account.
And that's what Andrew had done. Andrew had pulled his money out of his bank in South Dakota and put it in the bank in LaPorte. Okay. Now, Belle didn't want it put in her bank. She took it out in cash, and we'll just take this to the farm and keep it on the farm. It'll be safer.
Yeah.
Okay.
And truthfully, at that time, that was, banks were considered somewhat unsafe.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, she's got a good case there.
Yeah.
But, Andrew's brother did not believe any of this. So he's like, well, yeah, we had a couple rubbish pits that she had me dig, and she filled it in, and then we, covered it over, the rubbish pits. So they went searching for these rubbish pits. And so they started gathering and digging, and the bodies were found. Andrew's body was the first to be found, as he was on the top of the pile. In total, there were 5 bodies found that first day. And in the end, a total of 12 bodies were found. And these are men, women, and children. So bodies were in various states of dismemberment. Some bodies may never have been found, as it was a pig farm. And you can feed bits to pigs, and they're just going to eat it. You're never going to find it.
Rumored the mafia certainly took advantage of those and alligators.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there are ponds and lakes. There was a lake on the property and a pond on the property.
There you go.
And she could have put them in the cart and dumped the cart in the lake.
There's always that possibility.
Laid them down or whatever.
And back then, things weren't as technology wasn't there, so
no. And she was
easier to dispose of.
Worked at a butcher shop.
Yeah.
She knows how to handle a hatchet.
She knows how to section. Yeah.
Yeah. So most were never identified, but within that pit that first day, the body of a young girl was found, and that was Jenny Olson.
Wow.
It would have been her 18th birthday the day that she was found. She was found on her birthday.
Wow.
She had been missing 2 years. So evidently she did not go off to college.
No.
So once the bodies were found, people started to question if the headless body that was found was that of Belle. Rumors began to spread that they had seen a young woman with Belle just days before, but never saw that young woman again. Belle Gunness was pronounced dead, even though the body that was found in the basement.
Yes.
Even with the head, it would have been about 5 inches too short and 50 pounds too light.
Yep.
Okay.
That's pretty good for that time and age to be able to figure that.
Right. So there is a brief overview of her. Now, let me say this. I'm going to speculate on Belle and Ray for a second.
Go for it.
Was he involved? How much? I think that he was involved. Not in the murders, but in the cover-ups. If he was involved in the cover-ups, he knew of the murders at least. Yes.
He may not have actually perpetrated them, but he knew of them.
Correct. Yeah. I think that she was the poisoner. She then, once you were poisoned and incapacitated, she struck the killing blow. Yeah. And then Ray helped her cover everything up and dismember.
Well, it makes sense. You think about H.H. Holmes.
Drag them out to the pits.
H.H. Holmes had a caretaker that was involved in disposing of the bodies and all that.
And if you see Ray Lamphere's picture, guys, just Google his name, and the picture that pulls up is creepy. He looks, and I don't know that he was mentally all there. He just looks off. Yeah. But when he was imprisoned, and like I said, he denied knowledge. He denied being the murderer. He denied killing Belle. And he told his cellmate, "She's out there, Harry, and I'm better off in here."
Yeah, probably safer.
Yes, that's exactly his thing. He was safer. Yeah. So I think that whether he was in love with Belle and wanted to marry Belle, which some of the news articles, some of the news articles from that day and age said that Ray was getting so agitated that Belle would not marry him. She kept bringing all these suitors in. Well, all these suitors had money. Ray didn't have any money.
Nope.
So
he had nothing to make it worthwhile.
Right. So, there was one podcast that did kind of play on the fact that maybe Ray was Belle's lover, but not the marrying kind,
Could be.
and maybe Ray got upset, and so that's why he then ended up murdering her and the girls. But I go back to that Norwegian orphanage, and I really think that it was a shell. And I think she set that up. And when she set up her will, 12 hours before the fire was set,
Yes.
I think that she knew that she was transferring all of her funds into the shell company, that when she escaped, she could then go in and retrieve that money.
Show company being the Norwegian.
The Norwegian orphanage. And I think she utilized that to adopt, and that's in air quotes,
She could
adopt
be.
all these children for fees
Yep.
over the years, all these foster children who come and go. And I think that she went on and made a new life with her with that seed money.
Well, it makes good sense. Back in the day, if you had a child, especially out of wedlock, and you had the money, it was easier to pass that to somebody else to raise, pay them the fee, and it was no longer part of your life.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
The one kicker that really made me think that this is true is that in 1931, a woman by the name of Esther Carlson,
I think I've heard this story. Go ahead, yeah.
was arrested in Los Angeles, California.
Yep.
Where was Jenny Olsen supposed to be going to college?
Yeah.
In Los Angeles, California.
Yeah.
Does she know somebody in Los Angeles, California?
It would lead to be, yeah.
She was arrested for murder. She had poisoned a man after taking his money. Okay, she was put in prison.
There's an M.O. It looks familiar.
Right? She dies in prison, okay, before she can be tried and convicted.
Yeah.
In the bottom of her trunk was found that picture I just handed you guys of
one,
Belle and her 3 daughters.
Oh, no kidding. This is in the bottom
that
of...
photo was in the bottom of Esther Carlson's trunk.
Wow.
Now, there is a
Why
man
would
out
somebody else that you don't know have that photo?
Okay, so Esther Carlson, in the historical record, cannot really be established pre-1908.
Okay.
Okay? Is it Belle who's gone to LA to make a new name for herself, right?
Sure.
Or is it an immigrant from Sweden who didn't come to America until 1908, who is another black widow? Because there are several black widows operating, especially in California, who bring men into their home, take
Those
care
are the
of
ones
them.
we
Is
know
Belle
about.
her inspiration?
Yeah.
That's my thinking.
Could
Is
be.
Belle her
Could
inspiration?
be. I mean, it really
Did
could
she
be.
see that photo and keep that photo as inspiration?
Yeah.
I don't know if the photo found in the trunk was an actual photograph or if it was a photo of a photo. A newspaper clip. I don't know.
I still
That's
like
gonna
the
be the
idea
important
that this
key.
could be a, kind of a hero kind of.
It could be. And it's one guy, and I'm going to listen to this because, like I said, again, I am invested in this case now. I'm going to track down as much as I can. But he thinks that he has found Esther Carlson, and it is not Belle Gunness.
Oh, really?
Now, they tried to do DNA on the headless corpse in Belle Gunness's grave.
Yeah.
But the DNA was compromised, and they could not determine if it was really her.
Makes sense, yeah.
Which is frustrating because it's like, oh my gosh, I would really like to know if that's her.
Yeah.
I personally don't think it's her. So, we've passed the true crime aspect of today's
But if she
podcast.
isn't Esther, where did she go?
I don't think that she was in that basement.
No.
I think she got away somewhere.
But
She was too damn smart. Look at all the bodies that were found.
She
Anybody
had
with the kind
everything
of
laid out.
Yeah.
She placed her scapegoat Ray
Common sense. She already had a plan B in place, and
Absolutely.
she was
Absolutely. And I think she probably tried to drug Maxwell and hoped he died in the fire.
Didn't work.
Probably didn't work, and he got out. But yeah, I don't think she's the headless. Now, what was in the fire were Belle's false teeth. There were false teeth in. So, but I think she took the false teeth out.
That's an identifier. Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you? Yeah.
Just leave the false teeth in there, and they'll think
Because
it's
it
you.
makes it look like it's you.
It does. It made it look like it was her.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and the question we have to ask ourselves, who was the headless body?
there.
Now, I mean, there's a lot of choices. You don't
There-
necessarily have to have a... I mean, Jesus Christ could have been anybody that she picked up in LaPorte.
Remember, she was supposedly seen days before with
With
that
a young girl.
woman.
Yeah, and that could have been somebody came in. She said, hey, I need a
housekeeper.
Yeah, I need a housekeeper, farmhand, whatever. Would you be willing
I
to
got
do
this
this?
big old house.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Right?
I'll rent your room.
So,
Oh, yeah.
true crime can often lead to hauntings. We talked about in our previous episode on the
Oh, God,
gun
yeah.
how you don't have to have tragedy to have hauntings.
No.
But if you have tragedy, you can have hauntings, right?
Yeah, and I want to reinforce that. A lot of people think that, you have to have somebody died there to be haunted. You don't. It can be attached to an object. It can be result of an action. It could even be, we've investigated cases where we believe the ghost perished 3 or 4 doors down from where the haunting was, but for whatever reason came to that site. There's not always a right. The one thing about parapsychology is there's no real hard, fast rules or regulations. There's an exception to every rule that is made.
Right.
I mean, it truly is.
Yeah, it truly is. Truly is. So is there anything pointing to LaPorte area hauntings? In fact, there is. The LaPorte County Historical Society Museum has an exhibit on Belle, obviously, because she's a famous part of the area. And I spoke to the director of the museum yesterday. Mm-hmm. And of course, she says that there is hate for Belle in the area. But there's also part of the area that leans towards, I don't want to say love or affection, but they like Belle. Okay?
Well, it certainly brings traction in,
Right. She says most people bemoan the fact that the most famous female serial killer lived and killed in their town. And she's like, can't we be known for something other than
if you can't be known for flowers or skyscrapers, the next best thing's to kill her.
Right. But come Halloween, there are those who will dress as Belle Gunness. Mm-hmm. Children will dress and adults will dress. She said this year, 2 of the people she knew dressed as Belle Gunness for Halloween. Yeah.
Funny when it comes to money how that works. I hate to say it. My grandfather was a Pentecostal minister, and please do not hate us because it's not against Pentecostals, but that hairdo, especially the bun in the back in this photo, that's one that a lot of Pentecostal women wore. And when I look at this picture, I think back of all these women, because when I was growing up in the 70s, and that was the style of most Pentecostal women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It really was.
Absolutely. So I asked her about the museum, because in the museum, they have Belle Gunness's wooden cart.
Really?
Her cart. It's right there.
Is this the one that they alleged was used to move bodies?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one I thought. Okay. Wow.
I mean, that was the farm cart. It would have.
Yeah, that would hold something. Yes. Yeah.
It would have had many uses, including transporting the body parts.
Bodies, vegetables, whatever you need.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
multi-use cart made by Acme.
She and Ray would have used that cart. And so I asked her, I said, do you have any activity in that area of the museum? And she goes, not much in Belle's exhibit. She goes, but other things do happen at the museum. And I really wanted to get into it, but I was like,
I wonder what else they have at the museum.
Yeah.
Would you like a group to come in?
We might be making a trip to LaPorte.
Yeah.
So, but she did say that a woman who had claimed to be sensitive did refuse to enter that area. And I wouldn't, I mean.
In the area that have Belle Gunness.
In the area where Belle's exhibit.
And first of all, I want to say that there's been this legend that anywhere we go to investigate, there's a good restaurant. And that's not how I look at things, nor by bars. But there is a great restaurant up there that's ran by the Amish. Yeah. And it's good eating. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
That's how we determine how
we I know.
Yeah. Let's see.
It's always like
Spencer Library. That's where the Hilltop's at. Okay, yeah, we can go there. Yeah.
There's a really great restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always Chief's thing.
Oh, yeah.
But she did confirm, and I had heard stories of people claiming to see white misty figures in the woods along McClung Road. Okay, the farm no longer exists, of course.
Yeah.
And there is a row of modern 1900s homes. I hate saying 1900s. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because
I mean, it's your typical farm road where the houses line up along the road. One house, right?
Yeah. Usually wind breaks in between because they farm the fields and
yeah. But this is more. It's really turned into a wooded area. There are a lot of ponds and lakes there now, and kind of an industrial area on the north side of LaPorte. Mm-hmm. It really looks like an industrial center now.
How far is LaPorte from Indianapolis?
It's all the way.
I know it's right there on the end, going in north, Michigan,
just across west from South Bend.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I know it's up there.
Yeah, it's all the way up there.
That's up not far from Napa. That's actually north of Napanee.
Right, right. So.
The restaurant's in Napanee, I'm just saying. Anyway, go ahead anyway.
Here we go with the restaurant again.
If you were wondering.
Yeah.
So those houses sit on the Gunness farm. There's got to be activity there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So there are stories that I found. I can't confirm them because I didn't have the original source material, but there is a story that two teams from the northern area, two paranormal investigative teams, have been up to the house on McClung. And I found these stories on the Scared to Death podcast.
Okay.
Now, the stories are intense. I'm just going to give a brief telling. I'm not really going to give names.
Yeah.
But if you want the full story, go to Scared to Death podcast, search Belle Gunness, and you'll pull up the episode. But content warning. This episode and this podcast is very mature. Language is very rough.
Okay.
It's adult in all aspects of the word. So, trigger warning, whatever you want to do, it's not for everybody. And it's not my cup of tea, but I did listen to it for the research for this podcast.
Okay.
So, there was a woman named Diane, and she grew up in a house across the street, I believe, on McClung Road. So, not on Belle's farm, but across the street from where it would have been. So, basically on Belle's farm. But anyway. She grew up there, was raised in there, and then she raised her children in the same house. And when she was in her 20s, she saw a woman in white appear in the yard, and she said that it looked like Belle Gunness.
Okay.
When she had her sons grew up there, and her one son started having negative encounters with a spirit.
Really?
And became fascinated with Belle Gunness and Murder Hill and everything. All the way to the point where he actually...
They named it Murder Hill.
And that was the local name for it, was Murder Hill.
That's where the bodies were found. That was the makeshift cemetery of the property. Okay.
Yeah. So there was a hill on the property.
Interesting. Okay.
They called it Murder Hill, and he became infatuated with this place negatively, and he ended up taking his life on Murder Hill.
Oh no!
And Diane really felt that her son was taken a hold of by negative energy and influenced him.
Wow.
In the early 2000s, a family moved in across the street from Diane's place. And they had two young boys. I mean, young, like non-school age yet.
Yes.
And one of them was talking to imaginary friends. And he said that these friends were victims of Belle Gunness, who he called the killer ghost. Mm-hmm. Now, the family had been told about the house being built on the site of Belle's farm. In fact, their basement evidently was Belle's basement area.
Wow.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Poltergeist all over again. Here we go. Yeah.
They bought the house anyway because their home searching up and going well, and they were tired of looking.
And we know
Sound familiar?
all
I know
about that. Yeah.
Feeling.
Yes, if you have a haunted house you'd like to get rid of, please email us at info@spiritindiana.com, man.
In South Central Indiana.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, the boys were too young. They didn't know any of this when they went into the house. And, of course, mom and dad aren't going to tell them, you know. But the spirits gave the boy information about the case that he should not have had any knowledge about.
Really?
And one day there was an incident in the car, and he was upset because the ghost got locked in the car. And mom's like, well, if it's a ghost, it can get out of the car. No, he's really upset. And then mom felt a cold breeze go through her, and the boy goes, oh, never mind. You were right. He's right behind you now. It's okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So at this point, this is when the family brings in the paranormal investigative teams.
Yeah.
Okay. And a couple groups went in. They caught EVPs of a female saying hi. Another EVP supposedly said, I'm Belle Gunness. During one of the investigations, a male member of one of the teams was pushed down the basement steps.
Yep.
And that was it for him. He was done.
He must have money and an insurance policy.
He was done.
Anyway, yeah.
So that's what I've got on the homes that are up there on McClung Road. Peter Gunness is buried in Patton Cemetery in LaPorte. Jenny Olson Gunness, and her tombstone only says Jenny Olson. The Gunness is not there.
I'll ask a question. What was the gal off of Little House on the Prairie?
Laura Ingalls Wilder?
No, never mind.
Melissa Gilbert was the actress.
Okay, no, there was an Olsen I thought on it, too.
Oh, Nellie. Yeah, Nellie Olsen.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's going back a little bit, people, but anyway, go ahead. Never mind.
Okay. And that's not uncommon because Olsen, that takes place in Walnut Grove, Minnesota.
And that's a Norwegian name, isn't it? Yeah.
Norwegian skin. All of the Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, that area.
Highly populated.
The Upper Peninsula is highly populated with the Scandinavian countries. Yeah, that's where they went. So, that Olsen and Gunness and Sorensen, all those names. Yeah. So, Jenny Olsen, Peter Gunness, they're buried at the Peyton Cemetery, and Andrew Halligan is also buried at the Peyton Cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
The cemetery has reports of large orbs and photographs. Shadowy figures have been seen around these graves, and EVPs are also caught. And audible, disembodied voices can be heard.
Wow.
Not just on EVP, but by your ear.
Ow.
This cemetery is open to the public until 8 p.m., so if you live in the area and you want to go venture, please venture. But please
venture the hell out by 8 p.m.
We do not condone trespassing after hours.
Yeah, if you get caught, you are not going to mention our name.
No.
Forget Ghost to Ghost or Spirit Indiana.
So in nearby Pine Lake Cemetery, there's a mass grave for the victims that were found on her farm.
Yeah.
For many years, this grave was unmarked.
And it's weird, though. They buried them in another mass grave after they found them to begin with.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what I was
You've ID'd the bodies, or at least some.
Yes, there were some that were ID'd. I didn't go into all that, but yeah, there were. We knew some of them, but we didn't know some of the others. But yeah, they buried them, and it was not marked until 2008 on the 100th year anniversary of their discovery, not their death, because we don't know when they died. That the community put up a headstone, and it's a really nice headstone. It's really nice.
Well, that's nice. I mean, I'm sure that it helps make a bit of closure. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's drawn locals in for respect, and tourists come alike. And of course they claim the same activity. Orbs, mist-like figures are suspended above the marker. Now, of note, Belle's daughters, the 2 daughters, and then the child that she had with Peter Gunness was a boy, Philip. Okay. Those 3 were buried separately. Lucy and Myrtle were said to have been sent up to Chicago area to be buried next to their father, Mads. But we've got 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 bodies pulled from this site in a week.
And how many of those are identified?
Children.
3?
4, 5?
4, 5, okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But some of them were children. So some people speculate that it's possible that Belle's children, Lucy and Myrtle, got mixed up with the other children.
Sure.
And the bodies that were sent to Chicago may not have been Lucy and Myrtle. And maybe Lucy and Myrtle are now
still there,
mixed up with the remains in the mass grave.
Could be.
Who knows? Now, Ray Lamphere is buried in Roseburg Cemetery. And if he has a guilty conscience, he may be roaming himself, but I haven't seen anyone give him time or attention. And maybe Belle didn't give him the attention he wanted, so maybe he did away with her.
Yeah, that's a spin no one has thought about. Jennifer came up with a good one there.
Maybe
that's not. One, yeah. Maybe he actually did do away with her.
Maybe. I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, the thing that gets me is the beheading. Why would you decapitate a body? Let's just take a minute and think about that.
Only because you can't identify the body.
Teeth. Yeah, if you want, throw the false teeth in, get rid of the head. There are no teeth.
No one else was decapitated.
Nope. So why?
Hiding.
She was hiding something.
She hid out. She had her escape plan laid out. She cashed out that seed money from the Norwegian orphanage, and she lived her life.
Oh, yeah.
Whether she was Esther or not, I don't know, but she did not die in that basement.
She definitely went somewhere else. There's so many times, and, we're starting with technology that opens so many doors we didn't have.
Right.
I got involved here a couple of years ago with the hunt for Hitler, and they believe that 80% chance now that Hitler survived. He lived his life out in Argentina and disappeared.
That was a fascinating.
Oh God, yes, and it had a lot of big names. Especially the gentleman was the Green Beret. I'd seen him in several things, and several podcasts, and several YouTube videos, and he's very good. And he tracked
Hunting
him
Hitler.
That was a good series. If you haven't watched that, we're not sponsored by any of those people. They should, but they don't. So anyway, but if you like to watch it, it's there for you.
That's the episode.
All right, so we're gonna. You want to go over your sources you've got here before we?
Yep. I just put everything away.
That's okay. I got mine out here if you want them.
Yep. We'll grab that
one through. Okay.
So we had a ton of sources. I mean, Haunted Cemeteries of Indiana was the book that first put Belle back on my map. I knew about her, but the Haunted Cemetery really put her front and center. The LaPorte County History Society Museum.
Yeah.
They've got a really good article. Newspapers.com, of course, for all of the articles about the murders and the fire and the subsequent arrest and trial of Ray Lamphere. Weird Indiana has a nice multi-page article on Belle. So Weird Indiana, your travel guide to Indiana's local legends and best kept secrets.
Troy's a good writer. He's one of them.
Troy Taylor, James Willis, and Mark Merriman. And then oodles and oodles of podcasts. You can start with Haunted Places and Lady Serial Killers. They're both podcasts. Those are really put together very well.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Outstanding. All right, folks, that's all we have for tonight. I hope you enjoyed this segment. It's now time for the Ghost Story of the Day with Jennifer Verne. By the way, this story was written by Jennifer Verne. She did a great job. Brought out a lot of things I didn't know about. So at this time, we will go to the Ghost Story of the Day.
Today's Ghost Story of the Day is from the Green Mountain Gem newspaper from Bradford, Vermont. This article was published November 4th, 1843. The Ghost Child. There are those yet living in this very neighborhood who remember and relate with an awe which half a century has not abated the story of Ruth Blay and the Ghost Child. Ruth was a young woman of lively temperament and great personal beauty. While engaged as the teacher of a school in the little town of Southampton, New Hampshire, whose hills roughened the horizon with their shadowy outline within view of my windows at this very moment, she was invited to spend the evening at the dwelling of one of her young associates. Several persons were present of both sexes. The sun just setting poured into its soft, rich light into the apartment. Suddenly, in the midst of the unwonted gaiety, the young schoolmistress uttered a frightful shriek, and was gazing with a countenance of interest and horror at the open window, and pointing with her rigid, outstretched arm at an object which drew at once the attention of her companions. In a strong light of sunset lay upon the sill of the open casement a dead infant, visible to all for a single moment, and vanishing before the gazers could command words to express their amazement. The wretched Ruth was the first to break the silence. "It is mine, my child," she shrieked. "He has come for me." She gradually became more tranquil, but no effort availed to draw her from the terrible secret which was evidently connected to the apparition. She was soon after arrested and brought to trial for the crime of child murder, found guilty and executed at Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I do not, of course, vouch for the truth of this story with all respects. I will tell the story as was told to me. J.G. Whittier.
Thanks for listening to Ghost. Again, I'm your host, Chief Lawson. You can find Ghost on all major formats on the 15th and 30th of the month at midnight. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, maybe have a question or subject you'd like to ask about on air, or be used on the show, please email us at ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com, ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com. I want to thank my production staff on Spirit, Jennifer Verne, our research manager and our producer, and Heather Lawson, our trainer on Spirit and our podcast director, for helping make these podcasts possible. My chief of staff, Andrew Brooks, for his guidance and help on the scripts, and everyone else involved. Thank you so much. See you next time. Until then, stay safe and remember the truth is out there. Good night. Ghost to Ghost podcast and its contents is the property of Spirit Paranormal Ltd. All rights reserved. We welcome you to download and play the podcast and share with others for personal use. You may not, except with written permission, use or distribute its contents for commercial use. Spirit Indiana Paranormal, covering the Hoosier State since 2002, Indy's oldest parapsychology investigation group. If you're experiencing what you believe to be paranormal issues, reach out to us for help at www.spiritindiana.com or call our hotline at 317-883-9103. Again, that is www.spiritindiana.com or our hotline at 317-883-9103. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself and the ones you love, and be safe out there.